So just want to kick things off, Arrif. Everyone here has pretty much used Chope. I think, is it working?
I don't know. Yeah. Hi.
Testing one.
Hi.
Hi. So, restaurant reservations, something super archaic. And honestly, the restaurants hadn't really kept up with the times and technology. So
Sure.
You had an aha moment like, this has to change. So tell us about how you got the idea and how you got the start.
Okay, first of all, hi everyone. Thank you for having me this evening. Really honored to be here. Lovely space. If you haven't already signed up for your membership at the Great Room, please do so now. Not sponsored. Well, yeah, kind of sponsored. Okay, and also thank you, Startup Grind, for inviting me and chasing me down. I know I turned you down once already.
You were very busy though.
Well, startup.
Going through that growth phase.
Yeah, exactly. A few things to do. Okay, so the story of Chope. It actually wasn't an aha moment. It wasn't so much a light bulb that came up over my head as much as it was a slow burn. So I first chanced upon the idea when I was in business school. My own background is I studied I actually did a law degree in London, then came back to Singapore, worked in consulting for a company called Bain. Ended up in the Bay Area in the US doing work for Bain there, and then ended up going to business school at Stanford. And while I was at Stanford Business School, it was a rough time. It was actually 2008, 2009 for those of us who were in the workforce. I fortunately had chosen the right time to go to business school, but for my friends who were in the workforce, 2008 and 2009 were terrible years. Bear Stearns going down, Merrill Lynch, everything. And this was a time when a company called OpenTable actually IPO'd on NASDAQ, and it was doing really well. Analysts were picking up the stock. It was generating cash, growing year on year. And I was like, what is this business that can sustain basically apocalypse, right? So what is this model? So I looked at it, I was like, restaurant reservations. Of course, I was a user as well. I was like, okay, what is this business model? Okay, makes sense. But it's not even in Asia. It's only in the US. How is this possible? There's so much growth. It makes so much sense. It's so simple. Anyway, so I didn't think much about it. I just studied it as any good MBA would. And then it sat in my mind. And I think for 2 years, it was just there as an idea. I came back after graduating, came back to Singapore. Had no entrepreneurial visions at that time, to be fair. I came back and worked in private equity because that was where all the cool people went. Finance, the other side of the table, funding entrepreneurs. And but it just stayed there, right? It was just eating away at me. I was like, why? So I tried to do it in the evening. I went to speak to restaurants and I asked them, why don't you guys use an online reservation platform? I hate calling you. What is going on? Why are you stuck in like the middle of the 1800s trying to, you got to call us specifically at the hours of 10 to 2 and then 5 to 7. Otherwise, forget it. And I think prior to Chope's start, I'm sure all of you had this experience of picking up the phone and trying to call, try again. Okay, let me try. I'm going to remember an hour from now. I'm going to try. And for those of us who don't have assistants, that's a real pain. So so all these things just kept eating at me. And then I just decided one day I would go speak to the restaurants. I would find out. They said, well, we're interested in it, of course. It's not rocket science. People book flights, hotels, at that time not yet taxis, but we pay taxes online. Everything is done online in Singapore, even back in 2011. So why are we still not taking restaurant reservations online? When are you going to start? They asked me. So I said, well, that's kind of a weird question. When am I going to start? I ended up trying to balance it with my job. I figured out I couldn't build the technology myself, as I just gave you my background. I'm a consultant, a finance guy. What do I know about technology, right? But I figured that somewhere in the world, someone else had done something similar to us, and maybe, just maybe, they would license the technology to us to do it here in Singapore. So we adopted, without even knowing it at the time, I basically adopted a practice known as lean startup, right? I was trying to build a minimum viable product without having to spend 6 months and several hundreds of thousands of dollars constructing the technology, we just decided to license the technology. I found a product that met our needs. They were willing to do it on a variable cost, so per restaurant. They were a small outfit based in Manchester in England. I flew there on a Friday, signed the contract on a Saturday. Sunday I flew back to work, and Sunday I was an entrepreneur. Right, I had spent $10,000 to buy 10 licenses for 10 restaurants. And by the way, in case you don't know what that means, so Chope does restaurant reservations, but how do those reservations get processed at the restaurant? It's essentially we provide the restaurants with a table management system, which replaces the pen and paper diaries that all the restaurants use. And so because you have the table management system, we have the table management system, we know how many tables are available, real time, what's taken, whether table 2 and 7 can join, all that stuff, right? Whether you can do a seating at 6:30 and one at 8:30, for example. And again, that's a very mission critical technology. You can imagine if you walk into a restaurant at 7 o'clock and that system is down, it's like chaos, right? So I didn't want to build it from scratch. I didn't know how to build it from scratch. So we found a guy that had done it. He'd done it for 8 years. Small team, licensed it, brought it back. Then we started to sell to restaurants. And so the honest truth is it didn't work.
They didn't want to pay for it, right?
No, it wasn't even that. It wasn't even that. I think this is the funny thing about the startup journey, right? Like we had a vision of what we wanted to build. We went, found this technology. We thought we were, and I say we, really it was me, right? I had a couple of friends who were sort of, helping out at the time. Bought this thing, went to the restaurants, and I said, okay, this is where the adventure starts. Let's get this going. Do you want this? They were like, no. Yeah. They were like, oh, well, but it does all this cool stuff. Like, think about it. Imagine you spill your coffee on your book. It's gone. With this, it's all in the cloud. Well, there wasn't really a cloud there, but it was in the server. They're like, no, we don't spill coffee on our book. It's okay. And then we were like, wait, no, it's not really solving a need. You mean like you don't want it for free? They were like, no, we don't want it for free. So actually, we managed to convince 9 people, friends, just people who they knew they were doing us a favor. To be honest with you, they were just like, all right, you nice kids, whatever, get out of here. So they promised to start to do it with us. And between April and June, my friends and I signed up about 9 restaurants in total to use this technology. Then we had to build a website, so we hired a website designer. At that time, again, no tech background. We had no idea what PHP was, what AWS was, why you would need MySQL, NoSQL, none of this stuff, just website. So website, of course, this guy, he used the templated WordPress website, so really it was done like that. Next thing you know, we launched on June 15th with 9 restaurants, middle of the night, we launched the website. And immediately lost 6 of the restaurants because they came back to us and they said, you're sending 0 reservations. Why am I bothering to use this table management system? I've been using a pen and paper for years. I don't need to teach my staff to use pen and paper. They just know. Forget it. It's just too much effort. It's not worth it. So we lost 6 of them immediately, and that was the real start of the journey for us. It doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a punch in the face. And I think that's startup life.
Yeah, we hear that quite often. That you have one idea as to how it's going to go. Like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to create it. We're going to go out there, and you think everybody's going to love it, and then reality hits, and you get punched in the face, and the market tells you something completely different. So what kept you going in that instance? Like, you just lost pretty much almost 70% of the restaurants on the platform. How did you go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we got to rethink this and get to that stage where you actually did start scaling?
So it was a number of things. One, I guess, and the easiest answer is we had nothing to lose, right? So we could have just walked away and been like nothing, but there was also nothing to lose in trying to solve the problem. We started out trying to solve a problem. We were still at step 1 of that. We didn't think it was either this solution or nothing. We saw the problem, we were trying to solve it. So really that mentality of having a very clear picture of what the problem was important to us. And I guess the second part was, it was actually a very good question, because yes, you'd lose the 70%, but there's 30% who turned around and then they were like, it's pretty good. I want you to change this, do that, add this, do that. And then we were like, wait, So you're going to use it? And I'm like, yeah. You know, this is becoming a part of our daily operations now. We really need you to make those changes like tomorrow. Can you do it? And so you realize that actually you can focus on the failures, but it's much more productive to focus on the successes and the stuff that you need to do to keep going. And actually, it turned out to be a very important moment for us. So here's the story of restaurants across the world. Now, you know, we have offices now in Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, China, Hong Kong. We see the same dynamic everywhere in the world. 30% of your restaurants are driving 70 or 80% of your business. And this is true, I would guess, in every industry. I think if you look at hotels, for example, you probably see the same thing. If you look at, I don't know, co-working spaces, you probably say, it's a power rule that exists. 30% of something drives 70% of the value, okay? So what was happening in our case when you signed up 9 or 10 restaurants was that 7 of them are kind of empty. They're cafe somewhere, as a friend, you know, okay, fine, okay. So they don't need a table management system because guess what? They get 3 or 4 reservations a week, right? The other 3 were really busy restaurants that needed a table management system to be more productive. And these were like, I remember our first restaurant that was really busy was White Rabbit at Dempsey. One of the earliest, really, really busy ones was your favorite one, Wild Honey, right? And these guys, they relied on the system and they were driving so much more business than the other 7 restaurants that didn't need it. So it was an important lesson to us. Focus on the value, the stories that work, the clients that need it, and the ones that will pay for it. The other guys that don't need it, it's an important lesson. Either you ignore them and find, you know, they're not your clients. That's what product market fit is. These guys are not your market, or you need to adapt your product to fit them, which we did later. Obviously, you can, you know, book on a variety of restaurants in Singapore and so on today. That's because we also found a lighter product that worked for those guys, that didn't require them to be constantly using the system. Yeah.
It's really interesting, you know, it's that 80-20 rule or 70-30, you know, that they teach in business school, pretty much everywhere, I think. So you were able to get, you know, tailor the product, really focus on those restaurants. And actually, you know, I remember when Wild Honey opened, we ate there all the time and you always had to wait. And then one day they got the reservation system and everything was like, okay, I don't need to go down there and wait for an hour. Yeah. You know. What
kind of life are you leading that you go to eat brunch at Wild Honey all the time, man?
My girlfriend can tell you, we go out for brunch. It's a weekend thing, you know. So once you got that going, you started to pick up momentum and steam. Then you actually started building a team out. What was that whole process like, bringing the right people on board and the talent and everything?
Yeah, so very trite to say, you know, it's all about the people, it's all about the people. Everyone says that, right? But you know, until you've lived it, you really realize the problems are all about the people and the success is all because of the right people too. We went through several phases. As I said earlier, you know, we started the company trying to solve a problem, and that was an exciting thing. And to be honest with you, it wasn't a very difficult thing to understand. You know, a bunch of friends who had just graduated from different business schools or were, you know, in between jobs were just, it was easy for us to meet over coffee and I'd tell them what I'm doing. They're like, oh, it's exciting. It's not like I was building like heart stents or something, right? I could just get anybody to help out. And like I had a friend who was like, she'd done, you know, banqueting sales for a hotel, graduated from hotel school. I had another one who just graduated from Harvard Business School. She used to be a banker. Another one who used to be another consultant. So, you know, we just like came together and started trying to solve this problem together. And that was the first version. That wasn't the version of the team that we needed. First of all, too many MBAs, too many business people, great in small doses, great when you meet to solve a problem at business school, terrible when you actually are trying.
The thinkers, but not the doers necessarily.
Terrible when you are trying to build something, right? Everyone's sitting around being like, you know, the boxes like this, like that. And then there's one engineer at the back. It's like, oh my God, you know, shit, these guys do nothing. So just maybe not as productive as it could have been. But then, jokes aside, also, you know, the more honest truth is that you have to really think about your equity allocation early on. And when you have 4 or 5 people that are trying to run a company together, do you know whose company it is? Are you dividing it equally across all of you? Or in our case, I had started the company because I'd put the capital in. Somebody else had put a little bit of capital in. These other guys, they were putting sweat equity in, and that deserved some outcome. But it wasn't going to be as much as the guys who'd actually put money at risk, right? I mean, I think the principle is understandable, but when you're living through that moment and you've seen a company sort of get larger. So we went through, I'll fast forward the story a bit. We went through some cycles of failure and success and got bigger and bigger, and we reached a point where we raised our first round. And that was an interesting moment because at that time it was 2011, end of 2011, and Singapore ecosystem was still fairly early on. Startup ecosystem was early on. And, we raised a pretty largish amount, just over 1 million Sing. And at that time, that was, significant. And the company suddenly had value. It went from being a project to actually, oh shit, this is a, million-something dollar company. And we looked around the room and I was like, okay, crap, I actually own most of this company. Most of the value belongs to me. But at the same time, all the people working in here are now kind of thinking, what's my part of this? So we tried to work out a settlement. We couldn't because it was either we chopped the company up into tiny pieces and give it a bit to everybody, which even at that early stage I said, okay, you know what, while that feels like it could be an equitable outcome, that is not the best way to run a company. You have to make tough decisions early on. And that was one of the tough decisions I made. So I said, okay, we can't do that. I hope you can continue to work here. We can give some equity, we can give some salary, but honestly, this is what I can give. I can't chop it up this way. Plus, I put most of my savings into the thing. So we ended up losing or changing our entire first team. We switched to a second team that was more junior, more, sort of fresh out of college, people on internships, that kind of thing. And we got really, really lucky there. I cannot stress how lucky we were to have, people who were so bright and talented and willing to put in the hours and also the years, right? Putting in effort over 8 weeks is great, but to build a startup, you have to be committed for years. And these guys were willing to stay there, and they've been with us from 2011 until today. 7 years they've been with us. They've grown from, this is one guy, Dinesh. He's grown from being an intern all the way to today. He's our COO. And he's had his challenges. He's had to grow so much more than he outside his comfort zone. But that was the opportunity we gave him, and we were so lucky to have people who could grow with us. Yeah.
That's really great. And, once you did that fundraising round, you've actually, you just completed your Series D last year.
Yeah.
Raised over $24 million in total, US dollars, $13 million in the latest round.
Yeah.
Once you actually brought that, did the first round of funding, $1 million Sing dollars or just over that, did your mindset change because you now actually have external investors, to keep kind of interested? When you kept growing, what were the subsequent rounds like, and what were you thinking about when you were going through and raising again?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. So
yeah, sorry, that was a little loaded. Just tell us what you were thinking.
Okay, sure. I think fundraising comes with it. This huge sense of achievement, right? I'm not going to deny that when you get the money in, it's a validation, even if you don't need the money. Because if you think about where we were back in 2011, we weren't burning a lot of cash, right? I mean, we had a couple of engineers, we were making a little bit of revenue. The net burn per month is probably in the single-digit thousands, right? So raising $1.1 million was, kind of more of a validation of what we were doing, and also naivety on our part that burn wouldn't increase greatly, very, very quickly, right? We thought that it was a huge amount of money. Nowadays, I can tell you that that amount of money it's easy to burn through that. If you're doing the right job, you burn through it. If you're doing the wrong job, you'll burn through it. There's no way you avoid that. So the mindset at that time did change to one of so you get validated, first of all, good feeling. Secondly, it affects your team. I've already covered that, right? It suddenly goes from we have a dream to like, so how much is my dream worth, right? Give me my portion. And then I think the third part is you start to, you have a countdown timer, right? And I think I've gone through three cycles now, so I can confidently say that it's embedded in my mind now. But right after that first round, maybe I didn't feel it as acutely. There is a timer. It's your runway. It's how much cash you have left, and you have to have a good sense of the momentum, right? Because I started out the company, because of my background, I was basically the CFO. Every day I would look at the cash balance because I was doing transfers and so on. So I had a very good sense of what we were spending money on, how long we had left, when we would need to go to fundraising again. And that is, I think, a very important, it's like, for those of you who go scuba diving, knowing how much oxygen you have left in your tank, right? Or when you drive, how much gas you have. You just need to know that. And prior to that, maybe it was more about, let's validate the idea, let's build a team. Now it's, let's validate the idea and build a team by May. You know, there's a time to it. Yeah. Why
do you think some of, you talked about OpenTable, not in Asia. Why do you think there wasn't anyone in this market? Did it surprise you when you looked at Asia and you did not see anyone doing a similar thing, and you kind of asked yourself, why aren't they out here? I mean, this seems like such a great idea.
So when I first started the company, actually that was one of the reasons why I like this business a lot. The fact that it's so sticky. If you look at OpenTable, honestly, their technology is not the best, right? Their website is kind of, now it's gotten a lot better, but it used to be a lot clunkier. Is that a word? Yeah, clunkier. They still have a monopoly. They can price whatever they want because they're so sticky, right? Because they own what's sitting at the restaurants. Getting that technology, that B2B technology into restaurants is hard. It's so hard. But once it's in, it's so hard to get it out too. And in our case, we saw an opportunity to be the first mover. Switching from pen and paper to a digital version is, I guess, a lot like, for those of you who remember it, having sort of a paper diary or paper planner that you used to have. Who uses that now, right? Everyone uses Google Calendar, whatever, okay? Moving from that has obvious advantages. You can share invites, you can schedule stuff, change it, whatever. It has reminders, emails. If I ask you now for whatever you're using, I use Google Calendar a lot. Let's say somebody asked me to switch from Google Calendar to Outlook Calendar. I'd be like, why? There's not much functionality difference. Why would I bother doing that? There was so much advantage in moving from a piece of paper to that, but from this one to that one to that one, you're all the same, right? And so we have the same theory about where we sit. I want to attack that restaurant that is super busy, has a book like this, post-its sticking out, pages are folded, bits are torn out, guys are flipping through it. That's my target customer. That's the beautiful situation. When I walk into a restaurant, I'm like that. I'm like, yes, that's when you need a table management system. If I see they already have another table management system, it's hard. It can still be done, but there's obvious reasons. You need to be better at support or pricing or something. And so when we started, and even today, 90% of restaurants are on that piece of paper. Big hotels, yeah, they use something called, ResPack or whatever, but by and large, independent restaurants couldn't afford spending a couple of thousands of dollars on that. So the same situation is true now of a competitor when they come in. To get us out, to replace us, they'd have to go to a restaurant and offer something substantially better. If OpenTable was to come into Asia today, with all respect to them, they're great at what they do in the US, they'd still have to look at our restaurants and say, I have to go into each one of these restaurants, convince them that I have a better technology, right? Plus, remember, their network doesn't exist in Asia. They don't have any diners. So they can't sell that part, right? So
they'd have to enter the market acquisition, probably.
Yeah, and it's not that they can't do it. It'd just be very expensive. And at that point, what they probably do is turn around, look at it and say, we'll just buy this, shouldn't we? And then at that point, we'll say, well, either yes, no, what price? I mean, those are the equations that we started off thinking, right? So, yeah, I think that's why we have a good relationship with OpenTable. Their CFO is on our board. Their ex-CFO is on our board. And we've looked at them as what we want to be. For a long time, we looked at OpenTable as what we want to be in Asia. And then I would say about 2 or 3 years ago, we started saying, actually, OpenTable may not be the model that the future holds. We started looking more at Meituan Dianping in China. And now that is where our vision lies more. Than
And that leads to my next question, and then I'll open up to the floor. You guys are also kind of moving into content, almost becoming a media company in some sort of way. What are some of the plans that you have kind of going forward to, morph into certain other areas that complement the existing and core business?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's exactly the second part to what I was just saying, right? So starting off with reservation platform, great place to start. Great monetization model. I send you a diner, you pay me for sending you a diner. Very simple, right? Very easy to understand. But we quickly realized that in the US, you have verticals. Yelp does content, OpenTable does reservations. What is Grab? Is Grab a taxi company? Anyone here think Grab is a taxi company? No, right? Yeah. So what is Dianping? What is Ali? Is Taobao an e-commerce company? No. We're in Asia, we're all about platforms. The way we've expanded is vertically. We believe it's probably because there's no one homogeneous market that you can take a vertical slice out of. It's probably because there are so many competitive forces at play that you have to capture multiple markets simultaneously rather than focusing on one. But for whatever reason, it's undeniable that the platform play is the story that is happening more and more, and where we sit in our evolution. We've done the reservation vertical. We are leaders in that space. The next evolution of ours cannot be, we're going to do this reservation space in more and more and more cities with more and more people. Okay, that's linear growth. Exponentially, but of course our investors and even I would expect us to grow exponentially. 2x is not really the ideal growth rate for a startup. Where are you going to find that growth from? You have to grow into multiple verticals. So for us, that comes with thinking about the diner journey. I know for others in the dining space, they start to think, if you can do reservations in restaurants, maybe you can do spas, maybe you can do bowling alleys, helicopter rides, I don't know. But for us, we were like, okay, restaurants are in our DNA. But in the dining journey, there's so much stuff that we don't do. When you still want to find a restaurant tonight, our research shows that 75-80% of people still rely on their friends' recommendations, word of mouth. This is an era where everyone has Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts. You're still meeting your friends and saying, so where did you go? You went, well, honey, great. Is it good? There's no reliable way to discover restaurants. There's no market leader in that space in Asia. And so we feel that actually there's a play there that there's probably a better way to do that. At the same time, we've also, because we have 3,000, 4,000 restaurant clients now, they come to us saying, hey, we have a ton of promos and deals. We want to get them out. Can you help us get those out? So, okay, I guess Groupon had put a really bad stink on the deals business for years. I feel the room's clearing now.
Particularly for restaurants.
Yeah, sure. No.
Yeah, I remember those deals that you would get, and it was like 5-course. My girlfriend, I took her to one, and it was like we walked away going, that wasn't anything like it was advertised to be. And that really ruined a lot of people's experiences with that, I think. So, yeah.
But conversely, I think, so here's the funny thing, right? Restaurants close down really often. The average lifespan of a restaurant is 4 to 5 years. 20% of restaurants close every year. We've been around longer than most restaurants have been at this point, because we're coming up on 7 years now, right? We've outlived most of our restaurants. Most of those restaurants don't even remember that time that you're talking about. Maybe they do as consumers, but many of these guys don't remember it as people on Groupon. So they're coming back, they're asking for it, and I guess here's another lesson for you, right? These waves come and go in startup land. As much as we like to think that progress is all like this, sometimes it's a little bit of just this, right? So yeah, I feel like and we're seeing this platform play coming in, right? We're seeing bookings, discovery, savings, all coming together. We're getting approach of partnerships in delivery, ordering, payment. We're starting to draw together all the dining-related services. We're going to be very deliberate about how we build towards an end goal. We're not going to just chuck them in a box and shake it. So we're going to be very deliberate about getting bookings, discoveries, and savings going first, and then starting to explore the next few verticals that we do.
That whole dining ecosystem is evolving at an incredible pace, with things like...
Food tech is back.
Food tech is, yeah.
And Southeast Asia is, for many years, we were like, oh man, Southeast Asia not really on the map. Every year we're like, Indonesia, yeah, no, yeah. And it really does start to feel like it's coming onto the map now, right? You not only have Gojek, Traveloka, I mean, now you have sort of the second tier as well, right? The hundreds of millions, not just the billion-dollar companies. And so we're starting to see that really materialize. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to open up the floor to discussions. I'm sure there's going to be some good questions here. So you've got the mic. So who wants to kick it off? Somebody's got to have a question. Anybody? There we go.
Damn it. I was like, okay, gotta go home.
This is a moderator's like worst nightmare. You know, he's standing here going, where's the first hand? There's always like a 10-second delay, right? Right,
Well,
Andre?
Just trying to give it a moment for everybody to ask their question first, but since you offered. My name is Andre. Thank you for being here and sharing your ideas. I think the growth on the seed funding, the latest one by Capital Mall, the VC, I think that's a very interesting move. But with their network and all of the real estate and all of the malls in Singapore, do you see a similar move in other countries being expanded in that route as well? Having context not directly to the restaurants themselves, but the owners of the malls.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So some context for those those of you who didn't get it. So in our last round, Capital Land's venture arm, C31 Ventures, was an investor in Chope. They're also an investor in the Great Room. So you have them to thank for many of the things happening tonight. And I guess the question is, do we foresee that our relationships will move up one level from being directly with the restaurants to being with the mall operators? The answer is yes. So actually, when we first started out, we had approached a bunch of malls exactly with that idea, right? Why sign up one by one when I can sign up 50? We learned a couple of things. You know, I think a lot of the startup journey is about learning through mistakes. And the mistake that we made with those guys is that they actually have very limited control over the restaurant tenants. So in many cases, first off, many of them were just outright like, this is a stupid idea. Who's going to reserve online for restaurants? That's so stupid. But even the ones who believed it said, okay, we'd love to help you and we'd love to have that service available at our mall, but we can't give you commitments on behalf of the tenants. We can introduce you, which means that oftentimes they would organize a meeting. They would have, quarterly tenant meetings. They would have matters on the agenda, my aircon dripping, why the car park always full Tuesday. Like, okay, Chope introduce one thing. Okay, next. That was just like an item on the thing, and we just like get it done. And then we like sign ups here. Let us know you're interested. We'll do, and it wasn't very effective, right? And I think we only evolved that model about 3 years ago when we started really talking to Capital Land, and they were really, we got their money, so I don't really need to be that nice anymore. But the honest truth is they're really visionary about what they were thinking about what the malls are supposed to look like in the future. And I think it's partly driven by fear on their part because retail tenants are moving away. You guys are buying more and more stuff on Lazada, Taobao, Zalora. And so more and more of the mix is turning to F&B because, right now, coffee places are still buzzing, right? So if you look at Millennial Walk, for example, the ground floor is all like Kith Coffee, Starbucks, Coffee Bean, Coffee Connoisseur, Coffee Club, like just coffee places. So all the tenant mix shifting to F&B, so they realize they need to do a better job of figuring out how to be better landlords for their restaurants. So they said, okay, we will not just introduce you to them anymore, we will actually give you marketing support. What that means is they sign up for Chope, they get a Capital Land billboard somewhere or a Capital Land advertising partnership, right? Yeah. So and Capital Star, right? Their loyalty points has become a big thing. At the same time, we started doing stuff with, I think it was Vivo and what was it? Fernanda's Free, Centerpoint, a bunch of other malls at the same time. And it just so happened that all of these guys, funny thing about change is that it takes really long for change to happen, and then it's all at once it happens. So in the same year, while we've been speaking to these guys for 5 years, suddenly 5-6 big mall operators were like, yeah, let's go. And the funny part is they were all fighting to be first too. So we actually had to arbitrate agreement. We were like, yeah, we'll be the first with you for the loyalty integration, but we're going to do the marketing thing with you first, and the press release for you will go out first. And it was a really cool switch in us begging them for stuff to them being like, come on, come on. So it was really cool. But
Nice when it flips around
yeah.
that.
It was a nice switch suddenly. And so we figured out the model for working with them. It's not directly contracting with them. But we've figured out the model, and now it's a much more balanced partnership, and much more productive for both sides.
Next question.
That's it for the question. Oh no.
Not getting out that easily.
Okay. So how do you guys think about food delivery startups like, say, when Uber Eats or
Sure.
now Grab Foods, when they were coming into Singapore, like, were they more like increasing the size of the pie or more like competition? And what did you do about those kind of guys?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we've had so much contact with them, right? Same restaurants, people move actually, like marketing managers from Food Panda and other food delivery companies. We've never really found a way to work very closely with them, even though we have so many overlaps. We're still exploring right now, to be honest with you. Like, I literally have a couple of threads going with Grab and Gojek at the same time. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there's a portion of people who would probably have eaten out that deliver food to home now. It's true. At the same time, it's also had the positive effect that restaurants who previously wouldn't have considered online as being any sort of useful channel for them, now they get a portion of their revenue from Deliveroo, and you can't avoid having a partner that has an online presence, right? Whether it's Chope or whether it's Deliveroo or whether it's Instagram or whatever. So it's just been part of educating the restaurant. So net, I think neutral probably. Like, there's some negatives and some positives, but we're definitely not in direct competition with them. We are constantly thinking of like, how the hell should we work with them? I mean, frankly, we want a slice of their revenue, but they don't want to give it to us, so we're kind of stuck. Yeah.
Ben.
Thank you very much. This is really fascinating. So, so you have a point of sale sitting in the restaurant. Have you considered any time integrating with a competing point of sale?
Great question. Yes. Not just considered, did it, been there, got the t-shirt, had the breakup, wrote the letters. Yeah. Yeah, we did it twice. Actually, once was with a company that was acquired by OpenTable. So I mentioned earlier that there was a company called ResPack. They worked with hotels. We realized that they were in the 10% or 5% of restaurants that they already had a system. For ones where they have the book, we love it, we go in there. Once they have the system, harder, remember? So when we went into there, we said, okay, rather than getting you to switch out of the system that you've already paid $10,000 for or whatever, can we integrate with that? ResPack was happy about it. What we found actually was a couple of things. One, the restaurant didn't know where to go for support. It was kind of confusing because the second thing was the incentives weren't aligned, right? So we would sign up a restaurant that was already on the competitor system. We want to list them on us. There's an integration, there's an API that needs to happen. An API call, there's some development that needs to happen. There's maintenance that needs to happen for the API, all these things. They keep thinking, why are we incentivized to do this work for you? What are we getting out of it? There's some revenue share arrangement that happens up, there. But for an engineer, culturally, why the hell would I spend the effort, time, building or maintaining this API for you that doesn't advance my company's needs? And we would often run into that wall. We'd have to go right to the top again. I'd be like, Jason, this guy, come on, let's get this going. We get it down again, it would dribble all the way to the bottom, it would get fixed. They would do a release 4.7.9, something would mess up again. It just constantly happened. It was very painful. So what we envisioned as like a mass rollout of 100 restaurants across the region became like a handful here, one there, this guy would roll off. It was a lot more friction than we anticipated. Yeah. So we ended up. What happened was then they got acquired by OpenTable, and it really became a very weird situation because then the entire team, once it was acquired, the entire team changed, and the guys who now at OpenTable didn't even know about the partnership, and I had to introduce again, and they were like, oh, yeah, I guess, and they knew that there was a legal requirement for them to do it, but they were kind of like they were purposely delaying and stalling, and they said, what's in it for us again? Even the guys at the top now didn't see why there was an aligned incentive. And so that's kind of an example of where, often I think partnerships sound on paper like they're very attractive, but unless you have true alignment of the two organizations, it isn't really. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brian, and I've been wondering, for yourself, you are actually more of an entrepreneur, not towards the tech side. Like you mentioned earlier on, you are not really good at tech. So how do you came about from an idea, start from the real scratch base, and then slowly hiring engineers? I mean, what's the process like, step by step?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll break it down. I mean, look, today is a different answer, right? Today is the CTO, VP engineering. They handle all this stuff, But okay, talk about day one. So without a tech background, the answer is go and find a tech friend, right? And I had a friend who was a CTO of a gaming company in Beijing, and he lent me his time, right? Basically, that was his contribution, his sweat equity. I gave him some shares. He spent time interviewing a couple of engineers for me. And our first engineering hire was this guy, Sam Zhao. He was a PHP engineer at Weibo, and he responded to an ad we had put on JobsDB, okay, which is like today is probably anyone from JobsDB here? Okay, anyway, so it's not, I think there are many ways to hire engineers. Maybe that's not the best, but the interesting thing was that Sam actually wrote to me at my personal email address. He didn't respond to the JobsDB ad, and I was like, "How did you get my personal email address?" He's like, "Hacker." So so I was like, "Oh, okay, impressed by this guy." He wrote to me, and anyway, so there were a bunch of people who responded to the ad. I used my friend's time, my friend Andrew, to interview them. We sent out a test to them. A basic test, build a login portal, host it. A couple of guys took a few days. Sam did it overnight, so he really sent it to me the next morning. Beautiful, like login, everything. Walked through the code with my friend, and then we flew to Singapore. And that was really, it was a turning point for us because we had tried hiring engineers in Singapore, but I think all of us here who have tried that know that it's hard. There's some talent, and they're mostly, at places like, Carousel or Garena or Chope, unfortunately, and sorry for, or at older development companies, right? So it's hard. It's hard to hire talent. We decided to go to China and get a developer, and when you do that, you really have to be prepared for your transition from a startup into someone's life, right? So first time Sam ever jumped on a plane was to come to Singapore. First time he ever left China was to come here. We picked him up at the airport. 4 of us got in the car, went to the airport, picked him up. He arrived. He was like, "Wow, what is this place?" And you got to commit, man. It was a real job. It was a real life changer for him. For us, it was a fun project. You know what I mean? So that was how we built the engineering team. And then from there, Sam hired a couple of his friends, also from Weibo, to start. They weren't so willing to make the jump, so they actually started an engineering office in Beijing. Today we have about half of our engineering team is there. Yeah, slightly more than half. Yeah, sure.
Great. There's a question over here.
So truly fascinating story, Arrif. My name is Randeep and I work for the World Bank. So I'm interested in knowing that in your startup journey,
Sure.
Was there any interaction with the government? And did you receive any support from the government along the journey, or what was the sort of interaction you had with them?
Absolutely. So, yes, both good and bad. Okay, let me be honest. I think the bad is a very common story here in Singapore, where over bureaucracy prevents certain grants from it. And early on, when we were very small, we had applied to places, Spring, Enterprise, whatever, and it was a very KPI-driven exercise. They said, "Do you have any registered IP, any patents you can show us?" And we're like, "I don't really have a restaurant reservation patent. How do how does that work?" And of course, these were just KPIs that the civil servants were told they needed to fulfill because some lawmaker, some legislation somewhere. So it didn't really fit our needs. However, in its foresight, there was also some great stuff that was coming out. So a body was set up called the National Research Foundation, NRF, that was directly under the Prime Minister's office, okay? And they had been given a good amount of money to do grants, and not grants directly to startups, you see. The way they did it was they they co-funded investments made by incubators that were approved. So there were a number of experienced incubators that were lured or tempted to come into Singapore and start by the promise of, if for every dollar you put, the government literally puts $6 in, 6-to-1 funding. That is unheard of. Okay, just think about that. You get 6 times the returns, guaranteed. If the investment messes up, if you lose all your money, you only lose a fraction of it. If the upside, you make 6 times, because it's given as debt, right? It's given as convertible debt. So, very nice financial structure for investors. Had a couple of great incubators set up. Some of them were not so great, but many of them were great. Our first round was actually invested. Half of it came from a incubator led by a guy named Clay Christensen, Professor Clay Christensen. He's a professor at HBS. If you've ever used the term disruptive innovation, he's the guy who coined that term. That's how old he is. But he's also how famous he is, Clay Christensen. And he wrote a check, put a few $100,000 in. For them, a significant investment. For us, a change of life. And the government was the one that facilitated that by telling him, come to Singapore, we'll give you a 6-to-1 leverage on that. The fund no longer exists. I don't think it did very well, but I think without the government's support to create this ecosystem, it would never have happened. Second part to your answer is that actually, if you look at what the guys who are investing today across Singapore, it's a mix of strategics and VCs. The VCs, I think, are money that okay, I'll just put it this way. There's a lot of money that is GLC, right? It's government-linked companies. SPH, for example, is a large investor in Chope in our second round. Again, indirectly, Temasek. So I think a lot of this, while I can't directly attribute it to the government, in many ways, having a strong economy, strong government, all of that filters down to us eventually, right? These are companies which have a mandate to invest in startups rather than just look out for their own interests. Yeah.
Another question back here.
Hi, my name is Lua. So I see Chope has been expanding to various countries in Southeast Asia and China and Hong Kong. So my question is, what's your approach or strategies towards localization?
Yeah, very good question and very tough question. Over the years, we've tried different strategies for entering new countries. Some have gone really very badly, and I think we learn from those as well. So, for example, when we first entered Hong Kong, one that went really well, actually, Hong Kong was really well. I actually moved there and stayed there for 6 months. This was a different time in my life. I have 2 kids now, 1 and 3.5, and I can't do that anymore. But at that time, much hungrier, much younger, much less married, and it's just it's also a dream of mine. I'm not gonna lie. Moved to Hong Kong, lived in mid-levels for 6 months, and that was great. We signed up a lot of great clients. It was a replica of what I'd done in Singapore. So experience curve, I was doing it faster, harder, better, fewer mistakes. Then we decided, we're going to try and do Shanghai as well, right? We saw a great potential for that. And we said, it's not scalable for me to move everywhere and keep opening stuff. How about we try and franchise it, try and find people on the ground who already have relationships, pay them to sign up restaurants. What jobs do we need to get done? We'll pay people on the ground to do it. Signing up restaurants, okay, let's go. So we worked with a magazine, and magazines have these awards where they work with restaurants, best restaurant, this, that. So these guys had great restaurant relationships. We paid them. Disaster. They had no incentive to sell technology. They had no capability to sell technology. They sold ads, right? They sold full page ads, color, magazine, glossy, blah. Tell them how to sell a table management system. Like they'll go in and say, you want to be part of this? No, forget it. No reason why I want to learn any of this stuff. So that went terribly wrong. 6 months later, we had lost maybe not a lot of money because it was a success fee, but we lost a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to make this work, right? 6 months is a long time in startup world. So that model of localization, finding the local partner, actually didn't work for us. We had to go in and correct that by finding a dude sitting there in Shanghai at a desk with a Chope email address and him constantly on WeChat, so I could chase him about this restaurant and that thing, and and that was how we got Shanghai up to where it is today. We work with 400 of the best restaurants in Shanghai, I would say. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna sell how great the business is, but it went a lot better. Other localization stuff that we are struggling with, I think, has been China versus non. The server infrastructure for AWS doesn't go past the Great Firewall. Things like your Facebook login, irrelevant. Google SEO, SEM, irrelevant, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you got to localize. And trying to balance those two things is a huge challenge. Every time we do something, the Shanghai GM will be like, yo, how about me? And then we're like, oh yeah, yeah. We'll try. So he's always second. And you have to remember that you're competing against incumbents here who are super huge, super aggressive, super well funded, right? So it's your second priority against the best. It's like, playing with a weaker hand against Roger Federer. You're like, there's no way. So we had to really think about what our priorities were and find a niche that we could do well in, which was the middle to high-end restaurants, really serving the expat and the high-end market in Shanghai very well. We figure that even if we get a slice of the China market that is that slice, it's good enough. So I think strategy needs to localize, team needs to localize, product needs to localize. Beyond that, you just need to be aware of a lot of the legal stuff as well. We are not in homogeneous markets, so our structure changes market by market. Thailand, we use a nominee structure. Okay, this is getting a bit technical, but in Thailand, we own 49%, 51% is owned by a local partner. In China, we use a wholly owned foreign enterprise structure. There's just very many different rules that you really have to spend time accounting for. It is a huge disadvantage versus scaling across a homogeneous market. I cannot stress that enough. Singaporean startups have to learn how to fly before we even know how to walk, right? Year 2, I was already traveling to Hong Kong, trying to figure out how to set up a startup there when most startups would have been figuring out next iteration of my product, monetization, team, all these things. Yeah.
Good time for one more question. One more. Oh, we've got 3. Oh my gosh. Where were you guys earlier when there was some silence?
That's why I talked so long.
We'll take you here in the front.
Thank you. I am Lucy. I have a question regarding HR.
Sure.
I would like to know at what stage in your development you hire your first HR person?
Oh.
Why at this moment, and what was what were the objectives for that person? I'm a HR myself.
Yes, very passionate subject for me. So like I keep saying, right, problems of people. So first HR person was actually me, right? Like if you think about it from day one, when we started paying people, somebody has to maintain payroll. Somebody has to figure out how to do EPs versus work passes, S passes, CPF, how to do, all your CINDA, all this stuff, right? So I figured all that stuff out. Took me a couple of weeks, but I made a ton of mistakes, but I learned. And then it was me for about 2 years until it became ridiculous, until it became to the point where I would have to call off board meetings because I was doing payroll and stuff. And then, okay, fine. At this point, We got one of the ops guys, because payroll was kind of sensitive, right? You're like, you never want to give it up because you don't want everyone to know what everyone else is getting paid. So at some point, I was just like, you know what? I really got to give it up. So I found one person who I felt was suitable for it. I really threatened them with the wrath of God if they told anybody, and then I gave it to them, right? And then it worked out really administratively. So this person was repurposed to be an HR person. They weren't explicitly hired as an HR person. They were repurposed, and that role became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it became a full-time HR person. And I think about last year, we realized that HR really goes beyond just the administrative needs. The role was filled. You know, I mean, like we were doing a bunch of things administratively, bookkeeping, payroll, CPF, all that stuff, doing it very well. But there were so many other areas: training, career progression, recruitment. Yes, who's doing recruitment though? If it's me, or if it's the manager, they're spending all their time interviewing, looking at CVs. That's not a great way to spend a salesperson's time, right? Strategy, HR strategy, culture. Who actually takes care of the culture in a company? When you're 8 people, that's easy, right? Culture is what you guys joke about over beer. But when you're 150 people, if you don't have a culture document, like God, the next guy who joins is going to be like, so are we all about fun? Like, what's the principle here? You know, am I supposed to like work late because everyone else does? I don't know. So, okay. So then we hired a VP of HR recently, and she actually has all this stuff, like background in HR, but also background in business strategy and so on. She joined us from having done HR at Resorts World, Changi Airport, and really it felt like a breath of fresh air. It was like somebody had cracked open a window, right? Like suddenly all these policies are coming in. Small things like, well, small but very visible things. Laptop policy, okay? If you have ever joined a company that didn't have a laptop policy, you're probably really pissed off. You're probably really, really even more pissed off if they just raised $20 million and then were laughing at you because you didn't have a laptop, right? Now, the first thing she was like, come on, man, we have to have a visible sign of stuff that's changing around here. Everybody gets a laptop. And, you know, just so different, the mood. Things like training modules. We had people who joined us really like complaining so much they weren't on board. You spend all this time recruiting. You got a great guy, he comes in, he can't do his job well because he doesn't know the product very well. He's not doing well his job. He thinks, you know, what the hell, I'm going to join Facebook. Leaves. All this stuff, right? So there's a lot of inefficiency in a larger company. So really, if you ask me, my answer would have been around 60 to 80 people would have been a right time for us to hire HR. We waited till we were about 100 and some 100 plus. It's too long, way too long. Yeah.
How many people are you now?
130. By the end of this year, we're aiming 200.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. We could keep going, as you can see. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure.
One
I
more?
can do 2 more. I think
you want to take those last 2?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
It's only 8:09.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, great stuff. 2 questions. So you came out of Stanford, you were in Singapore, and you could have earned big bucks, but you would have struggled for funds for next 1.5 years. So what were the thoughts going on in your mind at that time? That is this important, or shall I go back to your private equity or whatever? So how did you take that decision? Question 1. Question 2 is, how did you get investors like SPH, Temasek? Did you actively go out and pitch in a certain way, or they found you?
Okay, so Temasek not an investor, SPH is.
SPH.
Okay. So actually, 4 questions there. 2 times 2, okay.
It's like a White House press conference.
Okay, so remind me again, the first question was, why didn't I go back to private equity? Okay, so definitely a lot of doubt, okay? Actually, on hindsight, it all sounds very cool and fun and stuff, but at the time, a lot of doubt, and I think I did what any very doubtful person would do. I tried to do both. I tried to keep my job and do the startup. But things started to get out of hand, right? I was doing sales meetings in the middle of my work day. I was like, this is not possible. So I went to my partner and I asked him for a 6-month sabbatical. And he goes, you've only worked here for 1.5 years. which was kind of the administrative answer. And then he looked at me, he said, we back entrepreneurs, we invest in entrepreneurs, and I can tell you there's no such thing as a part-time entrepreneur. If you're going to do this, do it full-time or don't do it at all. I was like, well, I feel like I've started now, I should do it. He's like, all right, then you're fired. So, so I woke up April 1st, actually. That was, April Fool's Day. I was like, the joke's on me, right? So actually, I didn't want there's this glamorous story about, the entrepreneur who's so persistent at getting what he wants. He sleeps outside the VC's house for weeks and, that's not my story. My story was I was trying to do everything and like have it all like very kiasu Singaporean, I wanted to have my job and also my startup and then I was pushed. I was really pushed to make these tough decisions because I just couldn't manage it all. And I thank God I had people that pushed me to make decisions. That jump to leave the job. Yeah, no, it really was a time constraint because at some point I was just like, I really need to speak to my partner about taking time off to go do this. And honestly, it was also really a lucky time because at that time I wasn't loving my job, and so I was like, worst case, if I get fired from it. If I was working at the best job in the world, I would have spent all my time and energy already doing that and trying to make that better rather than thinking about my own startup, I think. So I think deep inside, I already knew that was a possibility, and I was hoping to put everything together, but when push came to shove, I was like, this very clearly I'm going to do the startup thing. Even if I knew, at that time I knew that it was going to be a project that would probably fail in 6 to 9 months. I was okay with that. So very practical answer, right? I didn't have like this burning desire and dream. It was like a practical thing. I was like, risk analysis, this one pretty good. Yeah.
And the second part about the investors in the rounds, you were asking, did you find them or they find you?
Oh, no.
That was the question, right? Yeah.
Look, I don't think there's any different answer for whether it's a VC, a strategic, or whatever. Best way to meet investors is through introductions. If you write a cold email to Sequoia, like, why would they answer your email, right? So you've got to go through people that know you, people that know them. Thank God Singapore is a really small place, super small. You're going to be 1-2 degrees of separation from someone. You're always going to be able to get that introduction if you try hard enough. Otherwise, the introduction is only like 20% of the battle. The remaining is, do you have a solid business? Have you hit milestones that they're looking for? And just luck. I cannot emphasize how much of this journey has been luck. Yeah, people, luck, VCs, luck. Everything. Being here tonight, God knows I'll meet somebody that I could end up having a really great working relationship with. If I wasn't here, if you weren't here, luck. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Final question.
7 years on, you're still working with the company in Manchester.
Are you from Manchester?
Okay. Oh, good. No, I am actually. So they've. It's very strange. It's a very sad story in my mind because when we started out, they were such a nice guy, right? Older dude, 40-something, flew to Singapore, helped me deploy my first 10 restaurants. But then, of course, we grew. First round of funding, second, third, fourth, became 130 people. We're a very different company now. They're still the same company. And, I hardly speak to the guy anymore. Because our technology is so sticky, many of the restaurants that we deployed in year one are still using that technology today. But of course, as a technology company in year 2, year 3, we built better and better and better stuff. So most of our restaurants, 95% of our restaurants today are not using that stuff. They're using our technology stack. We own it. The 5% of restaurants that use it, they're happy. We have no immediate needs to change them. But frankly, this year is probably the year that they finally get phased out, and that's the end of the legacy, right? I think it's a symbol of any growing company. What got us here won't get us there, and that is true on so many levels. The partners that you have, the people, the leadership style, and it's very difficult as a founder. The hardest thing as a founder is recognizing that what got us here won't get us there. The emotional attachment to the people that help you start the company, it's undeniable. It's a bias that I have. As cold-hearted as I want to be, you can't ask me to be a great leader, a nice leader, but also a cold-hearted leader. It's impossible. So you know the classic story of the founder having to hire a CEO and stepping back to a more culture role or whatever, all very real problems at year 6. And honestly, I have no idea how people like Jeff Bezos did it. Like maybe either from the beginning he was just very deliberate about it, but for I think mere mortals like me, it's like partners like the ones we had in Manchester, as they become less and less relevant to us, I feel bad for them. Yeah. Yep.
Great discussion. I really appreciate it. I think everyone here, let's give Arrif a round of applause. I know you got to put the kids to bed soon, but I really appreciate you taking everyone's questions. Our next event will be with Anna Gong from Perks. That will be in May. May is Female Founders Month for Startup Grind globally. So keep an eye out for the email for that. We haven't locked down the date just yet, but that will be our next speaker. So thank you all for coming, and help yourself to some more food and drinks, and we'll see you at the next Startup Grind.